All right, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome back to Progresses Abroad. We are recording live here in Oslo, Norway, which just so happens to be the epicenter of the infamous coronavirus. Here in Oslo, Norway, we are currently under a 14-day government countrywide shutdown. Norway happens to find itself in the strange position of being just behind Switzerland and Italy for the most coronavirus cases per capita in the whole world. It's pretty wild, actually. So last Friday, the Norwegian government, along with the majority of other European countries, and some are still following in suit, to go into a virtual countrywide quarantine. What does this look like? Schools, the majority of businesses are closed. Essential services are still open, like pharmacies and supermarkets, and there is some limited access to restaurants and bars, although I would not recommend going to any right now. Despite being a third-rate capital of the corona outbreak, the vibe is rather subdued around here, with the majority of folks kind of keeping to themselves, which is pretty common here in Norway anyways. It's a rather quiet place. And also seems to me, people are following recommendations of the health department, like social distancing and isolation, and isolation if you are actually exhibiting some symptoms. We'll get a little bit more into that later. Interestingly enough, though, while there are test kits available, it is assumed that the outbreak is kind of unable to be prevented by just knowing who the infected individuals are. Therefore, testing is being more or less reserved for those who are exhibiting extreme symptoms. Over the past few days, the government has been rolling out a number of economic protocols to assure economic stability for millions of workers who are being asked to stay at home and not at work. So this includes expedited and enhanced unemployment and temporary layoff benefits to a mass amount of people who were working just as normal, just like myself, was working a couple days ago or like a week ago, and suddenly just kind of everything really took a trip down the rabbit hole. So this brings us to our main topic of today's show, which is distancing and why it's crucial for breaking the coronavirus outbreak, and why it seems like in some places like Norway, it's a bit easier to kind of voluntarily participate in these things like social distancing, but why it's also harder in other places, for example, like in the good old United States. So to begin with, social distancing, although you've probably heard about it already a million times, social distancing is crucial at this point, to what many people would call, like scientists are calling, to flatten the curve. We don't want it to go like this. We want it to kind of go like this. Yeah. And this brings us to apocalyptic scenario number one about the virus. So basically, this outbreak is going to peak at some point or another. If we can slow it down, that'd be great. We'd have a better chance of not overloading our healthcare systems. This is also the argument in places like Norway for not just going around and testing every single person, because most people will show little to no symptoms if they are carriers. Testing everyone is simply going to clog up the system and leave less room for the people that are actually having trouble, like elderly people, people with respiratory problems. There is, no matter how great your healthcare system is, there is not an unlimited amount of beds or unlimited amount of respirators. So there's been some stories, especially coming out of Italy right now, where although they do have a really great universal healthcare system there, there's just so many people loading up the system and not everybody's being able to be serviced. And I'm a bit worried about this happening perhaps in a worse way in the United States. Fingers crossed. Why, though? Why could it be worse in the USA? I don't want to say worse, but yeah, I mean, get ready. The wave's coming. So a few reasons. Number one, in the United States, we're not prepared with a unified national healthcare system. From what I understand, some health insurance companies are offering testing and treatment already, which is great, while others are not at all. And it's all just kind of unfolding in a very disorganized way. In the meanwhile, some people are getting tested, but maybe it's too late already and they've already infected a bunch of other people already. Whereas those people who are infected are on a different insurance plan and that doesn't provide test, or maybe it doesn't even start test. Maybe it will start testing, but it'll start next week, or maybe they don't have it at all, and so on and so on and so on. This is just not going to work. This is why social distancing is crucial. So let's go to some comments. I've been getting a lot of interesting comments from people out there, some viewers, some listeners. Um, let's check it out. From Lithuania has written, this whole coronavirus situation and how countries and people are reacting to the pandemic reminds me of a good old Hollywood movie. There's always been some smart guy who tries to alert people about coming danger, but nobody gives a shit until it's too late. The whole of Europe is in the epicenter of the virus, with more and more people getting sick every day. More countries have closed the borders. And they don't allow residents or any other people from other countries coming in unless they actually live in that country. For example, like somebody that's from Belgium, but they live in Norway, they can come back. Flights have been canceled and people are in quarantine. And what do I see on my Facebook feed? But somebody taking a last minute trip to Barcelona, somebody doing a last minute bar crawl. Think twice, everybody. Is it really necessary? Is St. Patrick's Day this year so important to celebrate? Is it worth risking your parents, your neighbors, your members of society's lives? Think about the others who might be infected, not only about yourself. Or do you want to be like patient 31? Hashtag stay fucking home. Now, in that last part, and this is a really good point. Is it really that important? So let's talk about patient 31. This is going to give us a bit deeper insight into how things happen in Korea. Patient 31 is referring to an article from Reuters from March 3rd called The Korean Clusters: How Coronavirus Cases Exploded in South Korean Churches and Hospitals. And I'd just like to read a little excerpt from the beginning, and you can read the rest if you're interested, because I'm going to leave the link below the video. So let's check out just a little bit of this article. Sit back, relax. I hope you're quarantining yourself right now and practicing social distancing and just listening along. Here we go from Reuters, March 3rd. The Korean clusters: How coronavirus cases exploded in South Korean churches and hospitals. So, South Korea has announced hundreds of new coronavirus cases in the space of only a few days and raised this infectious disease alert to the highest level. The surge in cases have centered around two main clusters, from a church in Daegu City and a nearby hospital. The new outbreak has pushed South Korea's tally of confirmed cases much higher than anywhere else outside of China. The virus was first confirmed in the country on January 20th, when a 35-year-old Chinese woman who flew from Wuhan, China to Incheon International Airport, which arrives in Seoul, which serves Seoul, was isolated upon entry into the country. In the 4 weeks following the incident, South Korea managed to avoid a major outbreak, with only 30 people contracting the virus. Despite many interactions between those later confirmed as being sick and hundreds more people being identified as contacts to the sick patients. But this all changed with the emergence of patient 31. And then there's this very interesting graph, and you can check it out if you like to read the article explaining how it passed from person to person. A little bit more. Patient 31. It's not clear where patient 31 became infected with the virus, but in the days before her diagnosis, she traveled in crowded spots in Daegu, as well as in the capital city of Seoul. On February 6th, she was in a minor traffic accident in Daegu and checked herself into an Oriental medicine hospital. While at that hospital, she attended services at Daegu branch of Shincheonji Church of Jesus on February 9th and again on February 16th. In between those visits, on February 15th, doctors at the hospital said they first suggested she be tested for coronavirus as she had a high fever. Instead, the woman went to a buffet lunch with a friend at a hotel. In an interview with a local newspaper, Ju Ong Ilbo, the woman uh, denied the doctors that had advised her to be tested. As her symptoms worsened, however, doctors say they once again advised her to be tested. On February 17th, she finally went to another hospital for the test. The next day, health authorities announced that she was the country's 31st confirmed case. In only a matter of days, those numbers had soared as hundreds of people at the Shincheonji church and surrounded areas tested positive. Damn. That's how it passes, everybody. Being silly. A lot of it's just being silly. That's why we got to social distance in this time. I mean, what did we learn? Now, one thing, what did we learn from this before I go off on a tangent? We learned you're not going to pray it away at church. Although it might be painful to have to stay home, you're not going to eat it away at a buffet. It ain't going away. You get it? You got it? You're passing it on. So you may as well stay home, even if you don't know. And one thing I can say, just as a side note, since we're talking about US, where I'm from, Norway, where I live, and we're also talking about Korea, where I used to live. It's actually, I used to live there in Busan, second largest city in Korea, down in the south, the San Francisco of Korea, anyways. And one thing I can say is that the Korean healthcare system is excellent. Yeah, so it doesn't surprise me that Korea's done actually such a good job at limiting and downsizing the amount of coronavirus because they just have a really good healthcare system. Moral of the story, stay fucking home is right. And I cannot reiterate this enough about how frustrating it was over the past weekend to watch all of these dummies on my social media feeds packing lines around the block at bars, at St. Patrick's Day parties, and also this conversation stirring conspiracy about the government taking control of our creative communities by shutting down concerts and performances. Trust me, I know I work in tourism. I'm work as a performer. It sucks, yo, but this is what we gotta do right now. You know, you gotta do what's best for not just for you right now, but what's best for everybody. And it's not forever. Don't worry, it's gonna be okay. But it's right now, not later, right now. If we do it right now, if we distance ourselves right now, we can try to nip this thing in the bud. But otherwise, it's just gonna go on and on and on and on. Oh, yeah. Now, coming from the perspective of an already affected community, we're not going to conspire our way out of this virus. So, if at all possible, we need to hunker down for a few weeks, stay at home, rest, work on all those things that you normally don't do because you're out and about all the time, etc., etc. I always like to think when I'm not doing one thing, at least I can do something else. That's great. Think about all the things you can do now. But that's a very flowery and kind of romantic way, and we have to think about this, and that's very positive if you're in that position. But we, of course, we need to keep in mind that, especially and for a lot of people, this is not possible. In the US, this is a very big problem because there's not much of a social safety net in the US. When the government asks you to just stay home for 14 days, you're like, and do what? And how am I going to make money? What? Yeah, so there's not such a social safety net like they have in a lot of other countries. And I don't know, for some reason, America is opposed to this still. Don't want to push our politicians to do these things, but maybe this will be the lesson. This is the lesson we need. Because in United States, there's not a really substantial social safety net, especially one that's easily accessible for most people. And in a lot of cases, the social safety net or the welfare programs, they're kind of demonized. If you ever try to access them, even on a normal day, Forget about a disaster happening. You're going to be shamed. You might feel shame. You might feel stigmatized. And at the end of the day, for what? Why feel ashamed? Why feel stigmatized? It's a totally normal thing that people do here. They go get their healthcare paid for by the taxpayers. They go get their unemployment paid for by the taxpayers. They go get their um, childcare subsidized by the taxpayers because we're all taxpayers. Um, there's no reason you should feel ashamed to tap into the resources that were funded by your own tax dollars. You know what I'm saying? What's up with that? Jeez Louise. I mean, come on. Trump just bailed out the banks with the snap of his fingers. That was basically $1.5 million over the course of like 3 days. That's basically a whole 2008 recession bailout like that. That's crazy. Nobody's even really talking about that. And you know what? You know who's going to continue to suffer because of all this crap? Working class people like you and me, the impoverished, the disabled, the sick, the infected, the vulnerable, all of these people who are not adequately supported by a comprehensive government system that works for the people. Any day of the week, they will suffer. Never mind during a public health crisis. I'd like to refer now to another one of our audience members, the fellow progressive abroad, who put this concept into other words. This is coming from Colombia. The real crisis with COVID-19 is how the poor and the working class will take years to recover economically from weeks, months of self-quarantines. Our global, national, and local institutions are being put to the test. Many of them fail because we've built a world where money is king and consumption is the fuel. Whew. That is well said. And what about the people who without homes, homeless people? Man, homelessness is crazy right now. Or the people that just can't go home. Once again, the general public find ourselves as victim of a systemic economic equality. We're victims of systemic economic equality. Let's bring it back to me, my beloved homeland of the US for a moment. A country that is the richest in the history of like all humanity. Providing for your people should not be a problem. But the systems aren't set up like this. It's not for healthcare, not for making sure people are taken care of economically in their time of need. Compared to Europe, where we are a continent of working class people, I mean, I live paycheck to paycheck. Times like these are unprecedented and they're unnerving. And I mean, I might not have a job soon. You know what I mean? Like people are going out of business. It's bad times. It's really bad and it's sad. But like I said, in these times of trouble, the government, with its already healthy social welfare system in place on any normal day, during a crisis, they ramp it up even more. I mean, this is the deal. This is the deal that we make with our government. This is why we pay taxes over here. And to be honest, it's not much more than the US. Maybe it's even less. And these taxes, they pay off in these times of need. This is our deal. Now, it seems that in the States, that under immense pressure, Trump is lowering interest rates, canceling interest on student loans temporarily, but this is just random. This is not part of any kind of citizen-directed system. These are mere little crumbs thrown out to us by giant corporations and the banks and the donors and their buddies, willing to sprinkle a little water our way to dampen the fire, like a benevolent dictator that we continue to sympathize with. And we continue to hand over the one piece of power that we have in their fate, and that is our vote. That being said, a message to the US and my people, place that I love, place that I'd like to return to at some point. It is not completely, if it is not completely obvious already, We need vast restructuring of our social system. I know a lot of people don't like the idea of big government, and this is prevalent on all sides of the spectrum. I mean, on the left, the right, the middle, the upside down. We cowboys, we cowgirls, we cow people, and we love the Wild West, and we love the American dream, and we love all this romantic blah, blah, blah. But I'm telling you, most governments suck. And if you're going to have a government, I mean, every government sucks. If you're going to have a government, let's make sure that it is one that works for us, that works for the people, to provide the basics: health, education, maybe some childcare, some guarantee of food to eat, and a place to sleep. Health, so you can live. Education, so you can make good, well-informed decisions. And a place to eat and sleep, so you can get up and do it all over again the next day. Is that really so much to ask? And why wouldn't you want a population of healthy and educated people? Why wouldn't you want a population of healthy, educated people? That's a very good question. Let me know what you think in the comments below. As an aside, I really wish Bernie could have driven that point home in his campaign. If there ever were a perfect, real life example for the absolute need for Medicare for all, we are living in it right now. And I'd just like to leave you with this, coming from a listener in Chicago. Fuck capitalism for putting people in a position to choose between not surviving economically in one sense and not surviving economically in another. Something to think about. So before we leave, I'd just like to say, send me your questions in the comments below about anything that could inspire future podcasts. Also, I'd like to interview you. Are you a progressive living abroad? Are you up to something interesting back home, back on the ground in your home country? And of course, I say home country because I also, I know that this podcast can sometimes seem pretty US centric, but of course I want to keep branching out, keep it transcultural. We're interested in all progressive action around the world because we are all a part of it. Don't forget to like this video on our page, follow us on Facebook, subscribe to this channel. And coming soon to a podcast platform near you. We're trying to get on that. Thanks for listening, everybody. I really appreciate it. Please give us a shout. Progressives Abroad, over and out. And wash your hands. Distance yourself. Peace.